last time I sat down to preach, I think was in 1984, just after my heart attack. I got in a hospital and I was already scheduled before I went in, so I took a chair up. I'm doing it again so I don't lose my balance. Maybe it's time to something different. Well, it says in our text this morning, Jesus sat down, called the 12, and said to them, "Whoever wants to be first must be last of all and servant of all." This is in Mark 9:35. This is the theme for today's text that we will be discussing. We based on what follows, but just to know the context of Jesus' comments, if you want to look at it, follow Mark 9, beginning with verse 38. I was going to have an overhead, but I lost my jump drive somewhere. The disciples had just been discussing who is the greatest. Me, who's the greatest? We're pretty good guys, but who's the best among us? Jesus decided it was time to take advantage of a teachable moment. He uses a child as the example for the day. Whoever welcomes one such child in my name welcomes me. There's another sermon here in this text, but not for today. Today's sermon is based on one of the disciples' response to this statement. What are the disciples thinking about now that he knows they've been arguing about something that they shouldn't have been, thinking about who's the best, who's the greatest? So let's read the text in 9:38 to 50. Jesus spoke up. John spoke up. "Teacher, we saw a man using your name to expel demons, and we stopped him because he wasn't in our group." Jesus wasn't pleased. "Don't stop him. No one can use my name to do something good and powerful and in the next breath slam me. If he's not an enemy, he's an ally. Why, anyone by just giving you a cup of water in my name is on our side. Count on it that God will notice." In this text this morning, Mark is telling a story about John. John doesn't mention it in his gospel. Luke does, but he wasn't in the group at that time. "We saw someone casting out demons in your name, and we tried to stop him because he was not part of our group. He wasn't from our congregation. He was not a Mennonite. He was not an American. He could not speak English." We can identify with John. We have these same kind of restrictions. It's important to know who is them and who is us. I was born into a conservative Mennonite family in 1939. My grandmother was the first Mennonite on my father's side. She was a McCoy. And when a McCoy saw a Hatfield, she knew she was right and the Hatfield was wrong. If you've heard about the feuds among the McCoys and the Hatfields when my grandmother was growing up. Perhaps I inherited something from my grandmother. On Sunday morning, my dad always wore a plain coat. My mother always wore a covering, and I always wore black shoes. I remember we used to get them from Montgomery Ward, and one time they came in brown, and I thought those were the most beautiful shoes I'd ever seen. But when I got up on Sunday morning, they were black. These concerns where we were right and other churches were wrong. Catholics, Lutherans, Baptists, Pentecostals, even General Conference Mennonites had some things wrong. They were wrong because something in their practice differed from mine. I was the judge. My way or the highway. I would have felt at home with John in our account this morning. But Jesus told John, hold on a minute. Don't stop him. Whoever is not against us is for us. John doesn't mention this little exchange in his gospel, but he does indicate that he had learned something. In John 10:16, he says, Jesus says, I lay down my life for the sheep. I have other sheep that do not belong in this fold. I will bring them also. I can clearly remember one day in 1963, while I was a student at the University of Puerto Rico, a fellow physics student came one Monday and told me he had seen one of my competitors. I said, one of my competitors? Yeah, I passed a Pentecostal church. Well, I told him that they're not competitors, they're collaborators. I had learned something in a few years. I told him that we were not competitors. We were working in the same direction, on the same issues, for the same purposes. I had changed. It seems Jesus' brain or his train ran on a different track. And when I was thinking about that, I thought that was a pretty bad metaphor, because sometimes our church approval runs on a track. It's limited. Jesus sailed on a different ocean, where there are a number of boats that look like they're going different directions, but are moving in the following of him. How are we on that ocean with Jesus? Well, we're going to soon find out. We are planning on sharing our building, our church, with them, with another group. This will be new for Fairhaven, so I was asked to share our experience with shared facilities. I should say at the outset that we often don't recognize our prejudices. Prejudice simply means prejudging, judging before we see the evidence, before we see the person, before we see what will happen. I don't know how you're feeling going into this new experience for us, but I will state up front, my prejudice, my prejudgment is positive. I look forward to this happening. A group will be renting our church for 1 o'clock on Sunday afternoons and at several times during the week. They need a facility. We have a facility that's available, and so we're going to try to work together. So I want to share a few of our experiences with that. And I've asked Betty Lou to share the first one in the Bronx in 1965.
Yeah, in our past, we have had an experience where we were the ones that were renting somebody else's facilities, and then later we had an experience where we were the host congregation, and others were renting. And so Ron has asked that I just share a few recollections from the Bronx experience where we were doing the renting. I mean, where we were the tiny group needing space. When we were asked to go into the Bronx to help this tiny group of Hispanic converts who had recently accepted Christ and were trying to start a Mennonite church, there were 5 couples, about 10 people, and a couple extras who joined us. And we had no place to meet, of course, and very little money. Most of them were lower income. So we were able to rent space in what in my mind now seems like one of these big, old cathedral-type, dark, these older churches, brick, tall spires. And we met from 1 to 3, I think it was, in the afternoon. And the host church, of course, met from like 10 to 12, I think. So they were going out and leaving, and then we came in. I suppose if I had to put a label on what kind of a relationship we had, I would say it was pretty much a business type of a deal. I'm not even sure the congregation knew that we were there. It was not a toxic relationship by any means, because it really wasn't a relationship. We never saw them. They made no effort at knowing us. They left, we came, we left. We had no space to call our own. We had to bring anything in that we were going to use, Sunday school materials or children's activity, whatever we were going to use that day, we had to pack up and bring in, and then pack them up when we left and go home. No type of a relationship at all. As long as we paid whatever it was we were paying, which was not much. That was it. And we were glad. I mean, we were happy for a place to congregate, to be able to have Bible studies and get together. But there was a real sense of not belonging. Like this really was not our church home. This was temporary. This was now I know that Jesus has promised where 2 or 3 gather together in his name, he meets there, and God definitely did. God is so good, so faithful, and so ever present that we never doubted that God was with us in that time, in that space. But there was always just a little, not, should I say unrest, just not a sense that we belonged, not a sense of home, and certainly not a sense that they were in this endeavor with us, not a sense that we were being supported or cared for, not a sense that their success would be our success would be theirs. It was just, they had a building, wasn't being used during those hours, so we could. And that was fine, and we were glad. But looking back on it, I realized that if we go into this partnership with Elio and his family and his church, I'm hoping that we can do it with a sense of mission that we did not have in the Bronx. A sense that as God works in their congregation, as God gives them success, as God brings in souls and new life and a new way of living, shedding God's love abroad and caring for each other, that we would feel that that was our success too. that this was part of our ministry, that this is part of something that we can do in the name of the Lord, that they can feel that this space, they can belong while they're here. We don't know how long that might be. It might be a few months, might be a few years, and Ron's going to tell you about our experience in Carlsbad, where we were happy when the congregation far outnumbered ours and were able to get their own facilities. So I guess that's what I wanted to leave with you as our experience as renting a facility. It was good in the fact that we weren't hindered, we weren't, I remember about the only thing I really remember about seeing any of that congregation, I remember a woman in the kitchen, because if they would have a fellowship meeting, they got out at 12, we came in at 1. If they would have a fellowship meal, the fried chicken, oh my goodness, the odors would just overwhelm us and our stomachs, would growl. But we were never invited to be part of that. And so I think both of us probably missed out on a blessing. And so my prayer is, like I say, that if we decide to go into this, we will do it with a sense of fellowship, a sense of not of competitiveness, and like I say, if God blesses them, as I think He will, and they become a flourishing full congregation while we maybe stay small, that we'll still have that sense of ministry and of success, of a blessing and a blessing them, and not it. Yeah, I think that's what I have to say. That we can just be the kind of host that will help them to in their endeavor to save souls and to bring others to Jesus.
So that was our one experience as tenants. We really were tenants. We were renting a facility from someone else for our use. I think Betty Lou has forgotten how cold it was that winter. And we didn't have any control over the heat. But anyway, that's a side issue. The next place I simply want to briefly mention is in Chicago, the relationship was quite different. There, we had 2 worship services, a Spanish and an English. And then we always closed with coffee time for both groups. So it was a case where the church building was owned by both groups. They both worked together, and there was only a separation due to language. And so I always had to preach twice on those Sunday mornings. That would be one goal we might have. And I guess I want to mention that at the first, that we don't go into it assuming that they're going to become one with us and we'll grow together, and that will be ideal. That will be a joy, but that's not dependent. In other words, that isn't a demanded outcome. Carlsbad was different. In Carlsbad, it was a lot like we are here. It was a small group, a little larger than we are now, and we had a building about this size with a worship center and then a fellowship hall and classrooms. And there was an Hispanic group that needed a place to meet. So we had worship from 10 to 11, and at 11 o'clock, we went to the Sunday school area, and they came in for their worship. Um, we had activities together. We had meals together. We were going to have a church directory together, simply showing two congregations meeting together, but that fell through at the last moment, and they did not cooperate in the directory, although the directory has some photographs of their group with us in some of the meal activities. I mention that because there's this place where what did we do, what kind of issues came up, or how did we work together? Well, it was a case where we knew each other. We knew us by first name. The pastor was Roosevelt. He was Hispanic, but unfortunately didn't speak Spanish. We didn't really know personally a large part of the congregation, but we had communication with the pastor, and if we meet him in Walmart, we'd stop and say hi and chat. And when they got enough money together, they found a place to buy. Why, they moved out on friendly terms. And we still said hi to each other when we saw each other, and asked how things are going. Let me mention two issues I guess 3 issues came up. One was when I went to Carlsbad, they had a thermostat that was only manually controlled, and sometimes people would forget, and so either the air conditioner or the furnace would run all week if no one showed up. Well, that was expensive, so I got a programmed thermostat that would turn off when we were done with worship. Well, sometimes it wasn't warm enough or cool enough for them, which is okay that they change it, but there was a setting whether you changed it so it would go back to the schedule, or would just continue running. And for a while there, they kept pushing that button, so we'd go in on Monday and it would still be running. Well, how do we solve that? We just talk to him. Oh, okay, we'll correct that. Another issue that came up is one time we walked in and there was a big American flag there. Well, we were concerned about that. So we asked if, they not have the flag while we're at worship. So he said, oh, fine. So they did. Another issue is the pastor was quite involved with issues in Palestine, in Israel. And so they wondered if they could put a facade of stones in the front of the church that looked like they came from Palestine. Well, we told that, and he said, okay, fine. My point is, we need to keep the communication open. And when there's a concern, not let it fester, but talk about it immediately. And it was right. There was, we shared back and forth, and they left as friends. So what are our expectations of this church? Tenants? Well, the kind of start is that. Friends? Or family, to expect them to become family. I don't know, and I can't decide beforehand how it's going to turn out. Let me close with an example. When I was in voluntary service in Puerto Rico, I did not work for the hospital, but I was given a room in one of the doctor's houses to live with an outside entrance. I was a tenant. About a block away was a nurse's dorm where Betty Lou lived. A number of other nurses lived there as well. This reflects the relationship in the Bronx, where I was a tenant. I went to work. It turns out that we built a studio across the street, so it was right next door. But I was a tenant. I didn't own the house. I couldn't control the house. I simply lived there as long as I paid the rent. So that was like the Bronx. But what do you know? Betty Lou and I became acquainted. We learned to know each other. This looks a little like maybe the church relationship in New Mexico. We got to know Roosevelt. We got to know, a little bit, some of his congregation, very few of them, but since we didn't meet together, we invited them to some activities. We had a music program one time where a music group came in. We invited them to also participate. The invitation for the directory, we looking at a relationship. So we became friends, but no more than that. But for Betty Lou and me, it's obvious that there were further developments. That's like Chicago, where the church became one. It was one family, even though they continued to meet in two groups. We became one, even though we're still two persons. I don't know at what point this will develop. Let's be open. And let's review our text. John spoke up. Teacher, we saw a man using your name to expel demons, and we stopped him because he wasn't with our group. Jesus wasn't pleased. Don't stop him. No one can use my name to do something good and powerful, and in the next breath, slam me. He's not an enemy. He's an ally. Why? Anyone by just giving you a cup of water in my name is on our side. Count on it. That God will notice. Let us share the cup with our friends. Shall we pray? Dear God, you know this is a new adventure for us. You've given us a building in which we've been meeting for years. Right now, we're a small group. We have room available for other uses, for other people. We've learned to know the pastor of this group. They need a place. Guide us as we talk together, plan together, worship together. Help us to follow your Spirit and encourage each other in your kingdom. In Jesus' name, we ask and pray. Amen. Okay, I think we're going to discuss the issue in Sunday school class.